It's super advanced. This is more advanced than we've ever dealt with. We've never seen anything like that. Scratch that. It's actually just a
So is a
balloon.
balloon.
It's just a
Exactly.
it's just
It's this super bizarre dichotomy.
There's a force in all of us that science knows nothing about, the force of fear.
welcome everyone to Induced Fear. I'm your host Oscar, and with me on this roundtable discussion of UFO, UAP, alien craziness that is going on in the news, I have John Marshall with Cache Valley Bigfoot and Chaz of The Dead. Just to start with, we don't know if anybody else is going to hop in, but we'll go. We'll go to my side, wherever the camera's pointing. We'll start with John. Uh, let everybody know where you're from, what you do.
Hey everybody, my name is John Marshall. I run Cache Valley Bigfoot on Facebook and Instagram. I have had two books out on Amazon. I'm originally from Utah, traveled to Texas, moved there for a few years. Now I'm back in Wyoming. Um, Always looking for stories, always up to talk to people online or on the phone, in person. Yeah, I'm here.
And then now Chaz.
Hell yeah. So I'm Chaz of the Dead on all the internet platforms. I'm a chief researcher over at Paranormality Magazine. I've written a couple books and for some other publications and stuff out there, all regarding the paranormal, Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, and all the strange stuff in between. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and get into some of the current mainstream strangeness that's
Yeah,
finally leaked into our reality.
super mainstream to where every single news outlet
Mm.
has got their fingers
Mhm.
in it, talking about it.
Problematically mainstream, one might say.
So yeah, everybody
Absolutely.
talking about it. We have TikTok; they're going crazy with it.
Hmm.
Um, so what are you guys's? Uh, we'll start with Chaz. What is your initial thought when you first heard the first time they said historical hearing? Because it's been
Right.
multiple times
Well,
that they have said historical.
we've had a couple of those historical UFO
Yeah,
hearings at this point, and they all kind of seem to fizzle out. And for me, that wasn't a huge surprise because we actually in the U.S. did have a similar kind of push in the early, well, mid '70s, with Hynek and Blue Book, and it was a similar scenario. There was this secret program, and then these people were like, "Hey, we're going public with this secret because this is so inefficient and it's not working. We need, better answers." And they kind of talked about it a little bit, and then fucking forgot about it. Vietnam and all that,
yeah,
yada yada. Uh, and so I do think we're in a little bit of a history repeating itself when it comes to these hearings in particular. Um, and especially when it comes to the idea of these quote unquote whistleblowers, who seem to be able to blow the whistle with absolutely zero negative consequences, which is
yeah,
must be frustrating for Edward Snowden sitting over there in Russia, being like, "Huh, I wonder why he gets to go sit in front of Congress and then go home to his family afterwards."
yeah,
It's
yeah,
quite an interesting scenario, they've concocted. They really certainly want us to believe a certain narrative. I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yep.
yeah. And what about you, John? What is your first initial takeaway as soon as you hear historical hearing on UAPs?
Well, it's just how I look at it. It's just I think they're doing it because they can't hide it anymore. They try to suppress it for so long that people have high power telescopes now. The iPhones can track things. I mean, it's just so they can't hide it now. So now they're trying to come out there. They're trying to put it out there. Oh, like we've always known about this. Well, they have, but the public has too. I mean, I've seen UFOs since I was a kid. I mean, so I knew there was something there, but I don't know why they're all of a sudden trying to make it such um, a grandstanding event when when probably like 85% of Americans already knew they were there. They just wanted to know what's out there. You know, that's what I've always wanted to know. Like, how many aliens are there? Are there like 3 different kinds, 20 kinds? You know, so I just think they're doing it to kind of put that in the forefront of what's going on in the background. So they're trying to put it ahead of what is actually going on in the world, like the fires in Hawaii, you know, fires in California, all the, you know, all the other stuff that's, you know, is affecting us. They're trying to put this out there, so we're going to ignore that back stuff. That's just me.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think probably we've all. I think people who are not so quick to just say, "Oh, can you believe it? The government said aliens are real. They're real," and I was like, okay, but why? Like, no, you aren't asking why they're saying that now.
It's quite interesting, I think, how this has evolved in particular, because for the average person, they're like, oh, shouldn't you be happy about this as progress? But for people who have been entrenched in, you know, following this story for years, decades at this point, if you've been into ufology since, you know, the fun times, the good old days, we're gonna look back and call them. This is, again, it's old hat, but the reason it's become, you know, point of conversation in Washington D.C. is not because people are taking the issue more seriously on the whole. You know, the same groups of people are still interested in the subject. This evolution comes from your classic scummy DC lobbying. And you have these UFO lobbies out there. There's currently 2 big ones, 3. There were 3. They've kind of merged. You had your Tom DeLonge to the stars, and that was the first really effective push. And you know, hats off to him. He did get some shit done, but I think he very quickly realized he bit off more than he could chew with all this, you know, disinformation, whistleblowers, all these tangibles, and he's back, you know, playing guitar with Blink-182. Good on him. Play some music. I get it. But his lobby was kind of absorbed by the second, more prominent one that's been around for much longer, and that's the Nap Corbell lobby. And they've been, you know, Bob Lazar was their dude, and after DeLonge's kind of bowed out, they've absorbed Fravor and those other pilots who saw those craft in the famous 2019 videos. They've kind of absorbed that lobby, but they've been around for a while selling their brand of ufology, mostly around Bob Lazar. And again, when you see, when you had that hearing with Grush, you had Corbell and Knapp sitting right behind them. They were, Corbell famously always underdressed. You could pick him out constantly because everyone else is in, you know, like nice suits. And he's in jeans and like a fucking crop top or whatever. But he's got his branding and he goes with it. It works for him. And this is the lobby that's really making the effect in, you know, the DC landscape, making the news, as it were, mainstream. But we can't forget our third ever present. They've been around for a long ass time too, and everyone hates them. Dr. Stephen Greer and his special group of military whistleblowers and top secret informants and so on and so forth. Which the entire community.
I loved when he came out. When he came out, and a lot of people were just like, "This guy, the most famous of them all." They hold him as, you know.
Oh yeah, every time they do a public
there's
hearing,
a motive there.
Yeah, he's a weirdo. Yeah. But I think it's interesting to loop him in with the others because technically he's doing the exact same thing Jeremy Corbell's doing. Like he had a guy recently at his Greer's disclosure event that he worked in the military whistleblower. He has the same qualifications as this Grush guy, but he was talking about crazy energy weapons in Antarctica and like lasers
Yeah.
and shit like that. And so it's all been dismissed. But technically, he is the same level of whistleblower as this Grush guy. Grush just happened to go through more effective channels, and so it's this classic kind of scenario where, like, if any subject is around long enough, eventually you'll get a lobbying type system. You can milk some money out of the
Yeah.
government, and so this
Yeah, that's
is
what I was
an
gonna say.
un-
It ends up being more about money towards the
Mhm.
Oh
end.
yeah.
Like,
Yep.
yeah,
Oh yeah, they end up just milking money out of the system, and unfortunately, it seems that this quote unquote disclosure movement is following that same those same guidelines. And you don't need any other further proof than to look at what MUFON just did last month. They hired, I believe she was a famous, I want to say tobacco lobbyist. I think she worked for Big Tobacco. She spent 20 years working for Big Tobacco. And MUFON just made her their like lead public relations kind of whatever the corporate title for her weird position is. But they're following
yeah,
that same route. They're going, all right, we've seen how effective Jeremy Corbell's doing. So we need to start lobbying the government in the same kind of way. So let's get the fucking tobacco lady. Let's get after him. Get us a big oil guy next if we can. And so it while it seems like on the outside it might be an organic springing of information, there's actually a very thick paper trail of money and lawyers behind all of it, which to any rational person should be suspicious.
yeah. I mean, you can see, like, if you just follow the people that show up to these
Mm.
hearings, who speak at these hearings, you find that like same paper trail and the money that they're collecting along the way as they're getting up to these points
Mhm.
in their careers. Um, and it's so bizarre that like now, like, I go on to either whether it be Instagram or TikTok, and everybody, even some people in our own community are
Mhm.
like, "This is historic. Don't you understand how big this is?" And I was like, "Why? They're disguising new information as old
Oh yeah.
information
Mhm.
and telling us like, "Oh yeah, that thing that you knew about before, now we're just going to say it's also true. We're just going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say what you
Yep.
say and say
Yeah.
it's true." So, like,
Yeah. And
and
so
then
it's
every
the
single time it becomes historic. It's another historic hearing. The one that just passed, everybody's saying historic. Like, they put these grandiose words next to what is
Mhm.
them just spewing the same thing over and over, and what we have already been talking about within this community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, sorry. No, no. A lot of it is, if you listen to some of the stuff they've been saying, a lot of it's been on coast to coast since what, the 80s, 90s. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just reiterating everything that, like,
Yeah.
as you just said, we all knew about it. I mean, it's just, I mean, even Roswell. I mean, that was, so why was that all of a sudden? It came out. It was a UFO, a crash flying saucer, and then what? Like a day or two later, no, it was a weather balloon.
Mm.
What changed that whole narrative? What they find? Now they're trying to now they're trying to go back and say, oh, we knew about Roswell. It really did happen. But what did they? What? Why did they hide it then?
I, I'm glad you brought up Roswell because I do think it serves as a perfect example that, again, the playbook hasn't really changed because just a few
No.
months ago you had those balloons slash UFOs that were shot down, and that's kind of been hushed up. No real follow up stories on what those balloons were actually recording, but
Yeah, exactly.
it's the same approach. If you take a step back, and we know the military has these manuals and these like codes of, all right, when something happens, here's what you do. whatever happened at Roswell, they told us one, it was aliens, and then the next day, two, they said it was a balloon, which is the
Yep.
exact same shit they told us a
Yeah.
few months ago. It was aliens. Just kidding. It was just balloons. And so, again, whether that is completely coincidental, it might be, but it does seem to be one of these playbook strategies. We muddy the waters by saying it's super advanced technology, and then we muddy them even further by saying, just kidding, it was actually super mundane technology. Nothing to be worried
How do
about.
they
Yeah.
how do they even go about that? How do they well, I guess people end up believing it anyway, so they can just fall back on that same
Mm.
excuse. Because I think
Well,
it's so
yeah,
funny that they can say, "It's super advanced. This is more advanced than we've ever dealt with. We've never seen anything like that." Scratch that. It's actually just a
it's just a
balloon.
balloon.
It's just a
Exactly.
it's just
It's this super bizarre dichotomy. And again, what that means, again, it could have been an alien or a balloon. Those are still within the
yeah.
realms of possibility,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. But we can recognize those as two extremes. So the answer was probably somewhere in the middle, right? Maybe the ones we
Yeah.
shot down, a few, who knows what the fuck Roswell was? That was, getting up to 100 years ago now, 80 something. So who knows? We're pretty far disconnected. But probably whatever we shot down a couple months ago was maybe some advanced drones or some shit. And they don't want to be like, yeah, they got some shit you should be worried about. So again, they say it's either aliens, which is so far crazy that it gets, people going in that direction, or it's balloons. And then you don't have to worry about it because it's just mundane
Well,
shit.
well, didn't,
Probably microphones or whatever, simple spying, nothing to be afraid of.
didn't like I don't know if you guys heard this or not, because I remember hearing about, I think it was last year, that the Black Knight satellite was shot down or was destroyed, but now it's back. So, like, why did they, so all of a sudden they said it was destroyed, and now it's no, it's still there, like, because, you know, they can't explain what that is at all. They, have you heard of the Black Lights or Black
Yeah,
Knight satellite?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's these variety of anomalies that, again, we are given certain narratives. And so I think there is a fascinating argument out there for the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But if we're taking it, I always use it Vegas odds. If we're taking this bet to Vegas, baby, we know one thing for fact. Number one bet would be human beings, because we have thousands of years of history that show we're tricky little fuckers, man. We come up with all kinds of schemes and plots and technologies, and we hide it from each other, and we use it usually for war. And these scenarios, we think, okay, but really, they're telling us it's aliens. There's a really fascinating, and this is known, story about how when the first fighter jets were being piloted, they would have the pilots wear like gorilla masks, like furry ape masks. So if anyone saw them flying these planes, they'd be like, I saw a gorilla flying this crazy looking plane. And it would completely discredit their
Yeah, it makes it outlandish at that point.
it would completely discredit any of these,
Yeah.
intelligence reports people could potentially leak out. And in my mind, I think, the government looking to save a few bucks. How can we do that? Get the hair off those gorilla masks. If we buy cheaper, just rubber latex alien
Yeah.
masks, that's way cheaper. um, so yeah, it's I do. I think if you were to take it to Vegas and what is responsible for these UFOs, I think the number one odds, the lowest winner is going to be the human hypothesis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That being said, there is something to the paranormal nature of UFO. Like, paranormal shit on the whole is absolutely part of the human condition, and there is certainly a
Yeah.
connection to that and this phenomenon. So it gets, again, we're presented with two extremes. It's either humans or it's aliens. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. It's
Yeah.
probably a combination of the two in some way. Potentially, who knows?
Yeah, because if it is humans doing anything now, I would think they got that idea from something else that they saw.
Yeah.
Like I don't
Mm,
think I don't think like you're gonna have us all of a sudden develop a UFO that works perfectly, and then
well, we've been into my B theory before that it might just be insect flight mechanics reverse engineered. Yeah, again, I don't know. There's been that idea too that it's communication with entities, that they're just like taking drugs and talking to the aliens. Which, as
Mhm.
someone who's taken drugs and talked to some shit before, I could see that. Now, do I think they could instruct me how to build a UFO? Nah, no way.
Yeah.
I don't trust like that. Um, but I do think the potential of those outside influences is definitely there. Um, but on the grand landscape of things, I do think that we're living in a moment that might be most analogous to the Manhattan Project, um, and the atomic research, because everyone in the
Yeah.
world knew we were building the atomic bomb. Like, everyone knew we were doing something, because all the atomic scientists just disappeared. And there's a bunch of evidence out there that certain kinds of scientists within these unique fields, they get to a certain point of their career and they just disappear. There was this one company that had this generator, and you can still find the videos online. That was this supposed kind of free energy device, and they like it had this really amazing test inside an office, and everyone was like bullshit. And so they like rode out to this island, they set it up, and they had it like power a bunch of lights and like a whole like crazy setup and stuff indefinitely, like for weeks or whatever, on this remote island. And after they posted this video, the whole company just disappeared. No more
Yeah.
content, no more anything. And so, again, it's something very similar happened to all the dudes who knew shit about nuclear physics back in
Yeah.
the 1940s. All of a sudden, your professor was just gone one day. No one could tell you where.
Yeah.
Turns out he was in New Mexico, not too far from where we think these craft might being built in, Area 51 and White Sands and whatnot. Lots of UFO lore associated in that whole desert region. And,
Yeah.
you know, they knew they were out there. Again, it was the worst kept secret. Everyone knew something was going on. And so now here we are, 100 or so years in the future. If you're going to do a giant project like that, you can't keep it secret. So how do you keep it secret? You muddy the waters. You make it as,
Yeah.
convoluted as possible. And even if you do believe some of these whistleblowers, they could potentially be victims of it as well. Even
Yeah.
Bob Lazar mentions when he saw the alien in the lab, he was like, I'm not sure if it was a person in a suit or an actual alien. I only saw it for a second. Maybe they were fucking with me. And if he's telling the truth, if he's not just spinning a yarn, which is another possibility that falls under this category, I could definitely see them just fucking with the scientists. Like, they knew they were going to fire him or whatever, so they're just going to fuck with them a little bit. And so whatever
Yeah.
it's the gorilla mask and the fighter jet. Um, you,
Yeah,
you make
you
it
give a little bit of a little bit of truth. You feed them a
mhm,
little bit of truth, and then you muddy the rest of it
exactly. And
because
so it's tough to say. It's tough to say what that
yeah,
grain of truth is.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. There's people like us for, like to like dive
Oh my
in and kind of pick apart everything because we're not just gonna sit here and go, okay, you said they're real. All right, case closed.
Oh yeah.
Everything. We'll
A
let you guys
government
take care of it.
meeting's not gonna solve this for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
And then we had immediately right after, probably not immediately right after their first historical hearing, we ended up, speaking of Vegas that Chaz brought up, we had that light in the sky, something crashed in somebody's backyard, 7 foot tall beings.
Mhm.
Um, and then all of the grainy videos of people people highlighting areas that were just trees or something like that and
Oh
saying
yeah.
they were, yeah, just like with Bigfoot.
It's like
Uh,
Bigfoot.
but
Hmm.
they just ran wild with that. Like it was just this continuous trickle of something crazy happening to kind of keep that same momentum until the next hearing. And then what happens after this hearing happens? Now all of a sudden we have aliens attacking people in Peru.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And
And
it,
Well,
then
it's
they're
predator
either they're
style
either
too.
predator, yeah,
Yeah.
predator style,
Totally.
or they had images released of just a light being, like it was just a being
mhm.
emitting light, and that was it. And
Oh
then
yeah.
also another grainy video of something like shape shifting, but it just looks like a tree kind of moving around.
See, I'm way
Um,
more excited by that stuff coming out of South America than anything coming out of Washington
but yeah, that was
D.C.
that was
Because
completely different. It was completely different than something happening just in America.
yeah, yeah,
It
and
was
so it's one of
because
the contender issues with this subject is because I always hate this conversation. This thing that pops up every time they have these hearings is that UFO map. You guys know the one I'm talking about with the orange dots on the
yeah, yeah,
black world, and it's like, look, almost all the sightings are in the U.S. and the U.K. Huh? I wonder if it whatever. And again, I'm just laid out all the reasons why it definitely could be U.S. secret craft and shit like that. But that map comes from the British fucking organization that the British MUFON. I forget their silly moniker, but and they only catalog English language reports, and so that's why all all of those the majority are in the U.S. and the U.K. and Australia and shit. And so
yeah,
um, there's this vast wealth of, especially Latin American ufology, has been about on par with the U.S. ufology for as long, like they've grown up together. But because of that minor language barrier, a lot of it doesn't make it over until more recent times. It's starting to break through, and I think that's an amazing potential because there is that dichotomy there. If this is just, secret government crafts, of course we'd be running operations in Latin America and stuff, but
yeah,
all the time and all of these weird side
Yeah.
effects, like constantly
yeah,
one because there's so much occurring and there's so much high strangeness, especially, we've kind of in the US come used to the abductions, the cattle mutilations and these kind of things, but Latin America is still firmly in like the Mothman, Flatwoods Monster. Like they're in the hyper high strangeness aspect of the
yeah.
phenomenon. Like you said,
They're
light
also their
beings
culture is
and
more of a spiritually connected
Yeah.
absolutely.
type of culture as
Exactly.
well.
And they,
Hmm.
Yeah,
and they're more open minded about all that stuff too, which is, and more open to, to have it on the news there and discuss it. I mean, how many videos have you seen of UFOs going into that volcano in Mexico City? I
Hmm.
mean, all the time.
Well, and this was one of the things I point out because my first book was a UFO case I did in Chile, and
Yeah. It's
Chile's
cool too.
government has been releasing UFO videos that are on par with those three we got in 2019 for
Yeah.
decades. They've been
Yep.
like, look at this weird thing we filmed. We have no idea what that is, and they just
Yeah.
release it to the public. And you have a culture down there that is very matter of fact. Like they're like, oh yeah, aliens are real. And almost all of them believe in some form of extraterrestrial or ultra terrestrial hypothesis.
Yep.
None of them are gung ho. Oh, it's the government. I didn't meet a single Chilean who was like, oh, yeah, aliens are real. 100, yeah, sure. Uh,
yeah.
Government is behind it? No, no way. There's no way. And so I always think about that conversation, especially when people talk about project. What is it? Starbeam? What's the secret one? They're trying to fake an
Oh,
alien
Project
invasion.
Bluebeam.
Yeah.
Yeah, something in that
Yeah.
that realm where they're going to trick us all into thinking aliens are real and establish a one world government. if they wanted to do that, they should have used the Chilean model because all of their people believe in aliens. The way we're doing it, no one believes in it. And so, again, I think all of these top-down explanations where like this is it, this is the explains all of it. None of those singularly are correct. There might be elements of truth within all of those. And
Yeah.
again, where there's smoke, there's fire. There probably is elements of truth within them. But to buy into one of them 100%, you haven't done enough reading. You know?
Yeah. But John, what do you think about when you first saw the story of the first story taking place in Las Vegas of the 7 foot tall being? What was
I
your initial
I
thought?
watched the video. I watched the video when the police officer was there, on like on his camera, and I didn't see what they filmed. I didn't see any being in the film. I couldn't discern it unless I missed it. I thought there was something, something did fall from the sky because they showed it on camera, but did it land in their backyard? I have no idea. They experienced something and truly believe they saw something. I can't doubt that at all because I wasn't there. But with how big it got with the videos, as you said, there's something there. Maybe I don't know why it went so hardcore with it shows an alien on video when you couldn't even see anything really.
Yeah. Yeah. There was like like you said, there was that initial video of something coming from the sky, which I don't know if any of you have seen when a meteor is cutting through the sky and it's pretty close. It also gets that same kind of greenish blue color as it hits a certain part of our atmosphere. Um, and I've seen that when I lived in Arizona. It's
Yeah,
so bright that it lit up the street that I was on. Like the whole street kind of went really bright as this
that's
thing
cool.
flew across the sky. Um, so I mean, there's that. But definitely from how the officer reacted to the situation, something was being experienced, whether it was alien, whether it
Yep.
was something government testing, whatever. Because then they could have thought, oh, there was too much of a buzz around it, and there was too much of a populated area. Let's bring it to Peru. Let's try the same thing, bring it to Peru.
Yeah, because
Um,
the family who saw it in Vegas did say they were getting people outside their house that were like telling
yeah,
them to be quiet and all that stuff too. So we can't talk about it anymore. They said.
See, I'm waiting for that moment in my career where they show up and say, "Shut the fuck up." I can't wait. I'm gonna be like, "Are you a human?" I'm gonna start grabbing on them. I'll be like, "Take your clothes off. Show me your skin." Because I love those Men in Black stories, man. That's where that
Well,
heist
I
thing.
mean, even the ones in Peru right now, they're saying it was military now,
Well,
or
yeah,
the witnesses aren't saying that, but that's what the news here in America is saying.
and
Say,
so
yeah, I don't know.
the Men in Black, I think, really are a great representation of that dichotomy because for as long as those stories have been popping up, you've had the two kinds of Men in Black. You have your like military buzz cut aviator sunglasses, they look like a Fed and they're like, stop talking about UFOs or I'll break your
yeah,
knuckles. And then you have your John Keelian type Men in Black who like don't know how to eat Jello and they can
yeah.
melt
They
a
don't know how to
coin in
be
their
human.
hand. Yeah, they're wearing makeup and weird, just
Yeah,
these super bizarre behaviors. And so, i- again, what the fuck's going on with all that? There's these two totally different aspects, and by all accounts, as long as everyone's telling the truth, and there's no reason to think they're not, both encounters seem to happen.
Yep.
And
yeah,
so who knows? It's one of the most interesting things I think about is my partner. She studied anthropology, and she always talks about the only real way to make money as an anthropologist is to work for the CIA. That's the one like number one hirer and payer of anthropologists in the United States. And you know, a lot of it you think spycraft and like geopolitics and shit like that. But if that's the case, why wouldn't you have a branch of like folklore and how to use folklore in a militant fashion? I mean, think about places. If you could cause a gin panic in Iraq or whatever, you could totally destabilize a city before you rolled in and took over or whatever. There's a million potential uses to weaponizing our mythologies and our belief systems like that. So again, it could
Yeah.
fit somewhere in between those. They've gone beyond just throw a gorilla mask on it, no one will believe it. Well, make it an alien, and you know what? Even better yet, some people will believe it. They'll
Yeah.
believe it's a fucking alien.
And then we're in a time to where so many of the younger generation get their news straight from TikTok.
Yep.
Anything that's on TikTok, they're gonna believe it
Mhm.
immediately. I can't tell you how many crazy, weird, obviously fake, like mermaid videos.
I was falling for that one the other day. I know exactly the one you're talking about. It's a good one.
You
It's a good
know,
one.
yeah, they're good. They're good. There's even now they're coming out with like these fake um 4K quality UFO videos
Oh yeah.
where jets are
Oh yeah.
following the UFOs through the sky. Um
Uh-huh.
and it's complete 4K. Like now all of a sudden that we are that they have told us, oh, UFOs are definitely 100% true. Now we're gonna have 4K quality rolling out instead of just like this weird little light that just kind of
Mhm.
dances around the sky. Um, and after all this, I believe that's where we're probably gonna head to. Is now we're gonna get like these clearer quality videos to kind of further uh, make people believe what these congressional hearings are about. So it's like, oh, there's a clear video now. There's a
Mhm.
clear video of this now. I mean, we still don't have a clear video of these 7 foot tall beings, but it's because the government hasn't said the words 7 foot tall beings within their hearings. They
Oh
have
yeah.
said non human,
Yeah.
you know.
Biologic.
Um,
Great
Yeah.
trivia.
yeah,
I
Biological.
love it. Give us
but
new terminology. That's how you stave off the ufologists.
yeah,
UAPs, non-human biologic. Get us arguing about the words. That's real
yeah,
productive.
yeah,
Um,
because even now, like even for me, I was like, why you just stick with UFO? Why'd you switch it to UAP? And then I'm just like, why do I even care? Like,
uh-huh.
why do I even care about the phrase? Like, it creates
Exactly.
that weird kind of
It's
turning in
the
your mind.
ufological equivalent of arguing about pronouns, where like
Yeah,
we could be doing something more important, couldn't we? you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's well, I was gonna say though, you made a really good point about the videos and stuff on TikTok, and it's something I talk about constantly outside of the UFO world and the ghost hunting and Bigfoot worlds as well. Is that we're past the day and age where you could film something paranormal and that would like qualify as evidence, because even
yeah,
if it was legitimately real, you could sit it down in front of an expert and they'd say, yeah, it's fake. Yeah, no, they use computers to do that because
Yeah.
this
Well. Yeah.
it's gotten to that point, and despite how bad the Avengers movies look, they really can. And if you want to get into the crazy idea of predictive programming, they're doing it on purpose, so when they roll out the aliens, they look extra real.
yeah,
But this whole idea that you can have an image that will convince people, that's gone out the window. There's no way you're going to
yeah,
capture a picture or a video on film and people are going to be like, yeah, that's real. Not going to happen. And so
yeah,
unfortunately for ghost hunters, they're all kind of fucked. But Bigfoot guys, you guys can still get that body. Bring us
Yeah.
the body.
Yeah. I mean, uh, there was a clip that came out about 2 years ago that I was convinced was a Bigfoot, and then at first I was like, it looks real. And then I went and did a deep dive on the person who did it, who put it out there, and I was like, okay, it's AI. I mean, it looked legit, but no, it was AI. It was all fake. So now anybody can do AI stuff on your iPhone and on your computer, and it's crazy how realistic it looks. Like, I've seen clips that that they say is from the war in Ukraine. It's a video game, but they're using it as clips on the news saying, "Oh, this is going on right now in Ukraine," when it's actually just a clip from a video game. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's crazy.
they're gonna do that with all of this,
Yep.
especially I think once it comes down to when they actually get a clear shot of one of these 7 foot tall beings, because right now the the one thing that has stayed consistent with the sightings of a being is everybody has said they were 7 feet tall
Yep.
and slender.
Yep.
That's the main thing. The newest thing is that they said they were predator style, covered in armor. Somebody took a couple of
Badass.
shots at him. Yeah, a couple of shots at him. It just knocked them down, and they got right back up after being shot, and then after that disappeared.
hmm
Um, so I
Yeah, no,
think once we get that, we'll end up getting that clearer quality of a being. I think pretty soon they're already starting to roll out the clearer quality UFO sightings. I've seen a couple already that have been, you know, insane quality, like the clearest I've ever seen when it comes to a UFO sighting, and it's just a video of jets following
hmm
UFOs. They're not chasing them in any way. They're just kind of following them through the sky, and
Yeah.
then you have the classic sound of people reacting to what they're seeing,
Oh yeah.
which always draws the people in more, because if somebody sounds kind of panicked at what they're seeing, that makes people believe it more rather than somebody who's just calm and just like, what's that in the sky? Oh, that's crazy. But when somebody has that kind of inflection in their voice that sounds kind of scared of what they're seeing, it makes it more believable. And I think that's what we'll start to see more and more, um, especially after all of these hearings and all of these news reports coming out with these
Yep.
7 foot tall beings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these it's tough to say, and so going to especially mainstream media sources on these subjects it's a tricky endeavor. I think it's best to find this is probably true with all information when it comes to these regards. An independent journalist, a truly independent journalist, that's kind of become a dog whistle these days. But an
Yeah.
independent journalist that is following, especially luckily in the UFO world, there's plenty of investigators who are on the ground looking at it from a grassroots level to buy into these, and you see all the arguing online, and I can't help but roll your eyes, but arguing for like, I think Lou Elizondo is a great guy and he's a national hero, and like I think he's a shill, fuck him, and all that is
Yeah.
so counterproductive. It's so ridiculous and time wasting, entertaining as it may be sometimes.
Yeah.
um, it's far from the actual um, investigations that are going on. And again, if you are following the ufological world and these true investigators, that is why a lot of these people who are in this world are like, yeah, no, this doesn't really do anything for me, because one, it's old news. We've already heard all of these stories. They're just continuing. It's the only thing new about it is the level of press they're receiving.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's tough to
And the
say.
fact that
There
it
is
has the
that,
word historical before it.
right. It's that knee jerk reaction to say that it's covering up for the actual shit that's going on. And because
Yeah.
that also has always kind of been what paranormal and weird stories have served as, especially in published media. That's why you got all kinds of crazy stories in the 1800s, is because they didn't want to write about us killing all the Indians. So
Yeah.
It was much better to like write about the giants, or there was a 10-foot golden statue in the Grand Canyon. Whatever it is. Though fun to think those things are true too. Who knows? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, this concept that we're in some kind of historic moment. You'll feel it if it's historic. If we get a body, that's historic. If one crashes and we like see it in broad daylight, and there's people on the ground there. Again, even then, if I wasn't there myself, I'm not sure I would believe it. It would be hard to
Yeah.
say. A bunch of TikTok videos and news stories came out tomorrow. Would you really believe it? Who knows? We're tough. We're in a weird scenario now, a predicament, I think.
Yeah. What do you think, John, when you see those TikTok videos of things? Do you think that's a good step into where we're going, or do you think that just further muddies the waters?
I think it's a good thing of both. I think it does both. I think it if people who haven't heard anything about it, see a TikTok and let me do research now. It gets people involved, but it also gets people to falsify stuff and be negative about it. I there's that quote. I don't know who said it. I think it was either George Lucas or Spielberg said that. What was it? 15% of movies are true. Something like that. Are based on fact. It was something like that. And so, Hollywood's been putting out this stuff about aliens. With Men in Black, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, all that stuff over the years. And so they kind of tried to how do you say it? Make you already aware that there is, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. But
also when they but when they, I get what you mean, because even when it comes down to those types of movies, like if we do, what was there was a weird found footage movie, and it was like, it always has those based on true events, for these UFO movies. They're always these like based on true events. Hell, even back in the day.
That was that one.
Yeah, Contact and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah, all that stuff. There's some they've already been planning it in our heads that because once it comes once as he's been saying, once it comes out we already knew about it because they've already been planning it in our heads for generations.
And that's a good thing when it comes down to media being used as a tool to kind of get the masses to talk about things more. When there was what was it, during like the Blair Witch Project, when that came out, they made it seem so real to the point where people actually thought that they watched a movie about people being murdered and disappearing.
Yeah.
It became so real to them. They made it that real in everything that they did. They had the actors use their real names in the movie, which played into that authenticity of it. So
and they shot it. They use their own cameras and everything. So
yeah. So like those things like that are great examples of how media can cause this stir within the world. But I think, like Chaz was saying, if what's really happening is there's no real change going on. I think for something to become historical, it has to create a fundamental change in the way that we live our lives.
Oh yeah.
If I still got to get up and go to work and pay my bills the same exact way that I did the day before this historic congressional hearing, then I don't think it was that historic.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Like I said, like look what happened, with 9/11. It changed a lot of how we travel, all that stuff. This is not going to change how we travel. It's not going to change, as you said it, get up every day, go to work, pay your bills, unless it's something real drastic, like if it shows like an alien, blowing up, a bank or something, I mean, I don't. It's not going to change much.
Yeah. Like, I
Yeah,
think if it was a real problem, I work outside, right? I think if it was a real problem that these UFOs are flying around and crashing all over the place,
Yeah.
because apparently they have the most advanced technology, but they tend to crash all the time.
we get them every
Um,
once in a while.
yeah. I think if it was an actual problem, they would be like, listen, you can't go to work today. You work outside. It's dangerous outside. They're just like falling out of the sky out there.
Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Well, we also do, I think, live in a modern conundrum. I think people who live in their current society throughout history, we always think we're better off than the people behind us, like we're doing it better. But if you
yeah.
study the history of information, most all information since the inventing of writing has been propaganda, like 80% of it.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes you get like independent paintings and stuff. Like Picasso was just doing his own thing, but even the
Yeah.
fucking Renaissance painters were paid by the church to paint that shit. It was propaganda. um, so we live in this age of the internet, and we have this grand assumption that like, oh, it's free information. This is all legitimate, true,
Yep.
and we don't recognize the fact that it's probably still about 80% propaganda. Um,
Yeah.
and so this dichotomy, especially when it comes to UFOs and paranormal shit, has always existed, right? There's always been a bulk of fraudsters kind of steering the conversation this way and that way, and the government just seems to be the latest guy cashing the check on the UFO gravy train.
Yep.
Well, guys, we have Karim joining us. He's from the Lost in the Desert podcast.
Hey
What's
guys,
going on, man?
good. I don't know if how good my audio is. I'm just joining from my phone. I saw the link and I said, "Oh, sweet, that UFO argument." How far are we in the conversation? I don't know. What did we talk about? What
Oh,
didn't? I'm not trying to.
no, no, no. I'll just ask you the same question I asked in the beginning. When you
Okay.
when you first saw like these news articles popping up of these historical congressional talks about UFOs, UAPs, um, becoming true, what was your first immediate thought when
Horseshit.
you saw those?
Immediately, I think something that government has always played on is sort of how gullible the public is, and not just talking about America. I'm talking about here, Europe, Africa, Asia, wherever it is. People sort of play on that gullibility, and people don't seem to understand that words really mean things. And in law, I briefly went to law school. In law, they tell you every single word. You can't just go off of the assumed meaning. You have to go off like the dictionary meaning. And when somebody says like, what's a UFO, to them it's literally unidentified flying object. That's it. And when I went
Yeah,
back, we had a brief talk about it on the podcast, sort of posted the video. I looked through, and all they're basically saying is these are mostly could be drones from other countries, could be vehicles. We could be behind on a military scale. And then they would be like, but it also could be, aliens. Who knows? They start talking about, so it's like the bulk of the conversation is national security. And then to sort of get the general public in or get some sort of like hype riled up so that they have public support, they'll be like, aliens, they're hiding them from us. ET, they actually caught the little fucker. Right. But
yeah,
you
but they don't even say
go on.
that. They say in a point of just trust our word.
Hmm.
We say they are real. Um, but like with us, like John here and Chaz here, we're more into that community of we have had our own experiences with things. We kind of know that these things are out there, whatever the hell they are, whether they could be military from another world or from another dimension, whatever. It's all kinds of
Hmm.
craziness that you can dive into. Um, they are saying things for like a matter of fact. And
Yep.
to go with your point of the using the dictionary the dictionary um the definition of a term
Hmm. Sort of,
we
yeah, to sort
talked
of
about earlier.
confuse and get people unsure.
Yeah, we talked about earlier that they are just making up new words now. They're making up new words that they now control the meaning to. So now they say UAP instead of a
Yep.
UFO.
Oh yeah,
Non-biological
I love how they
beings.
use acronyms. It's just
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, and then we have non-biological or whatever it
Not
was,
non-human
non-biological.
biologics. And again,
I said this
Yeah,
on the show. I said a non-human
intentionally
biologic could be
vague.
a fucking goat. Like a non-human,
yeah,
literally,
Exactly.
like not. It's in the word non-human biologic. It could be a goat. It could be a fly. It could be somebody left cat hair from on the
It's
scene. Like,
it's
what are we talking about here?
intentionally
Right?
vague. Intentionally vague. That's the only other way to, and it's very political of them. What else would you expect from DC? It's a very politician kind of thing to say. Non-human biologic. It could be they could be talking about moss growing on an asteroid that
Right.
lands on Earth.
If they
That's
really
what that
wanted
is.
to,
That's an
if
alien
they really
non-human
wanted to convince
biologic.
us. Sorry about the overlap. I didn't mean to cut you off, Chaz. My bad.
No, you're
Um,
good. Go ahead.
if they really wanted to convince us, excuse me, I would. I might have said like non-terrestrial biologics. Now I'm interested. I'm like, cool, things that aren't on either our definition of. So in biology, you have certain there's a certain structure of life, right? Certain sort of chemicals, certain elements have to be found within, so you can say like, oh, this is life. And when we try to look, I don't know if you guys are fans of Star Talk, Neil deGrasse Tyson's like podcast, but they have an episode maybe came out a couple weeks ago with an astrobiologist, and what astrobiology essentially is the search for it's a relatively new field, or past couple decades, once the space race really got more accessible to scientists. But the point is just to find the building blocks of life like on other planets. And people think like, oh, this is to study like aliens and stuff. No, it's just to study chemically, can we find what's it called? Can we find support of life on other planets? Because life could honestly just be bacteria. Like if you find bacteria on
yeah.
another planet, you're like bet, which is actually a lot of what when they go to Mars or when they're trying to get to Mars and go through um, uh, just sort of examining the soil and the moon. Like, can we find evidence of bacteria? Can we find evidence of something to support that life can be here? Right. And it's a really interesting episode. She goes back and forth onto explaining, like, the flaw. There's actually kind of a flaw is that we're assuming that all life on the universe is similar to life here, which is sort of the challenge of that scientific field is like, are we looking for the building blocks? Are we assuming the building blocks of life here, the chemical and biological and physical building blocks of life here match the rest of the universe and the solar system? Or because it is so, vast and infinite, can we find, are there different or,
Mhm.
excuse me, further expanded? So there's that. So we make a lot of like kind of those assumptions. I really like that episode. If you guys are interested, I'd go check that out. But one thing is that I was always, and I'm gonna be, Oscar's gonna have me on the show. Like, we're gonna record, I think, Monday. You said, and the
Yeah.
reason I pulled him is because I'm very logical, and I grew up loving science. Right, I'm not a scientist, right, by trade. I just grew up loving science. And one thing I really understand is that the scientific community doesn't give a shit. Like that's hoax because these scientists really will do whatever they can to be the first to actually discover something, but it's very hard for them to like lie and scam their way
Yeah.
out of it, like into it. And
And
if scientists are like, whatever, bro, right, all like they're like not even interested,
see, I'm
right,
glad
their
you said that.
silence is the answer.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that was going to be my unfortunate loop around. Because many people, especially in ufology or paranormal stuff, you know, thought they don't want to hear that. The whole idea of academics is, toilet flush. They don't want to, because again, there is, some beef with amongst the fields there. But if we're going to get accurate, representation of what's going on, it's most likely going to come from that academic field. The idea that the government's going to come in and be like, oh, it turns out we're ahead of the game and this is it. It's pretty
Yeah,
unrealistic. I often say that the only way you're going to get true UFO disclosure out of the government is you have to audit the Pentagon. until you have a realistic number on how much they're spending on disinformation, secret aircraft research, non-human biology, whatever these things are, until we have a paper trail of what's going on there, there's no way they're going to give you information that's not been carefully curated at the very
Right.
least. If
I think there's
there's grains of
194
truth in
countries.
it's curated truth at best.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like when stuff like this comes out, it's not going to be easy. But I also like to look outside of America. I was like, there's 194 countries, even the ones that can't effing stand us. Like, you think everybody's going to be on agreement in this? Like, come on, how hard is it to get 194 countries? Like, we can't get we can't get we can't get our senators on board. You think we're going to get 100? Like, the rest of the country all on one term? Like, come on. So I genuinely think, I said, when and if we get contacted by other people or we discover life, it'll probably be on a micro level, like bacteria, stuff like that, probably from samples from other countries, from other planets. Mars is supposed to be able to support water and stuff like that. We already know there are organisms here that can support, like, can live in those environments. So it's not outlandish. But also, if they do show up, they're not sneaking around zigzagging through military planes. If they do find a way to come here, they're coming with style, right? Like, that much I believe. They're coming on some Armageddon. They are coming with style. All right.
See,
Was it No, it's Independence Day, not Armageddon, right? Independence Day. Yeah, that's the
Oh
one.
yeah, Independence Day. Yeah.
They are here in that ultra terrestrial way, that there's some form of alternate reality to our current reality, and that there's certainly something to the idea of paranormal phenomenon. There's something physically happening in a lot of those cases that are un known in our current model of physics and science.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's never over.
But the fact that the government's saying some shit, they're probably doing it for some other reasons. The minute they start talking about UFOs and things like this, immediately I'm like, okay, so what craft are you soft rolling out? Like, what are we?
So what do you think there is? If you had a theory you could put together, like, what do you think they're trying to hide or distract, or the end game is?
I've got a theory. It's called B theory, and so
go ahead, let loose, set it free.
And I've talked about it, I believe, on Induced Fear once or twice. So I'm going to do a rundown version. Go back, find the old episode if you want
We're a safe space here.
Listener.
So speak your mind.
This is admittedly an insane story, and so to start, I'll start with the insane origins. It was 6 years ago now. 7 years ago? 7 years ago now. I was backpacking through Morocco, and I was writing like a tiny little WordPress paranormal blog. And in my travels doing that, I met this dude who had these weird claims to CIA connections and stuff. Some stuff to back it up, but nothing solid, as these weirdos tend to be. And he very nonchalant told me, "Oh yeah, no, I know people who fly UFOs. They reverse engineered the thorax of honeybees. There's an anti-gravity chamber in there, and that's how UFOs work." Totally off the cuff. And at the time, I was like, "Okay, dude, sure." Like, it was totally wild. I didn't even bother to take notes during the conversation. But years later, when I wrote my first book, I had mentioned this one-off little story in regards to Nazi UFO supposed connections, and the outlandish kind of stories out there about Nazis having UFO technology, and this whole idea that the bell, which most people think was a nuclear centrifuge, was actually this secret anti-gravity device. And in like 3 sentences, I was like, and a bell kind of looks like a bee. One time I met this crazy guy's bees, UFOs, bam, maybe that was it. And it was just this one-off thought. And one of the podcasts who had read the book and interviewed me, the host was like, that paragraph jumped out at me because I knew someone in military intelligence who worked with, he would tell them that he was a man in black. That's all he would say about his work. And on this man's deathbed, the only information he gave up to his friends and family was look at the bees. That was his, solution to if you want to know about the UFOs, look at the bees. And so
So we're
from
talking
there,
like regular bees, like buzz, Winnie the Pooh honeybees, right?
honeybees in particular, but I went down this weird rabbit hole and discovered this Russian scientist, Viktor Gerbinikov. He was a real dude, famous entomologist. He's like solved this alfalfa pest problem in Siberia and like saved a bunch of millions of dollars worth of alfalfa crop or whatever. Well regarded scientist. Towards the end of his life, he wrote this memoirs, and in one chapter, chapter 13 for you numerologists out there and occultists, weird stuff going on in the story. Chapter 13, he writes about this time he built a UFO based off of the wing shells of heavy flying insects. And he refused to say which insects he used because he feared the populations would drop too low if he revealed which insect he was using. But guess which population's been dropping lower and lower as UFO sightings have increased over the years. Weird graph there.
The
Um,
honeybees?
Honeybees, yes, the bees are dying quite rapidly, and UFO sightings have increased. I've made the graph on Google. It's a weird one. Bees die, UFOs increase. Again, correlation, not causation. Could totally be. Again, two totally random facts doesn't prove anything. It is weird though. But he said that any heavy flying insect, any insect that had like a thick outer shell that could fly, had this principle worked into their biology.
So
Um,
like what? Beetles,
yeah,
like big
so
beetles
that's where it
with
gets
like heavy
weird when you
shell.
think of like scarab beetles and their
Yeah.
deification in ancient Egypt and some of these weird ancient mysteries. I think about the guy here in Florida who did the Coral Castle. He said, um, this is a weird one. He said that he discovered the secrets of the pyramids. That's how he built this weird structure. And for those who don't know, the Coral Castle, supposedly this one immigrant built this massive, there are several ton coral blocks, and he put them in all kinds of weird astrological alignments. And then he had to move it in the middle of the night, and he did it by himself in one night to this new location. It's this bizarre local mystery here in Florida. Um, but his answer was that he discovered the secret of the pyramids, and reports was that he used this weird cone-shaped device to like levitate the blocks. Um, what's interesting about that is that in Aztec mythology, Quetzalcoatl had to recreate the current incarnation of man. There's this incarnation story where he goes down to the underworld and he has to trick the god of the dead by dancing around this pyramid and playing this horn. And to do so, he puts bees inside the horn and does this ritual dance around the pyramid. And this allows him to ascend back to the surface world with the bones of the last incarnation and make us our current incarnation. So there's this weird connection to pyramids, bees, and these cone shaped devices. So
Okay.
again, it's pretty out there. It's pretty weird. Um, but in this research I've gone down, and I mentioned earlier this rabbit hole of other scientists in various fields outside of aviation. There's this German guy who he invented the most efficient log flume. Like they still use his log flume technology in modern lumber yards because he uses like this razor thin amount of water, and he figured out the exact speed and like pressure you have to do, and so you can use like a quarter of the water that it would normally take to use a log flume. Um,
What?
Supposedly, he was drafted to this Nazi Bell project and was assigned on it and had this weird connection to these air bases in Nazi Germany. He was constantly there, the log flume guy. And in his personal journals, he wrote about all these other weird side effects that this alternate technology energy he discovered. And there's still an institute to this day that runs in Europe based in his name, the Streidenberg. I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
I'll send a link. Um, I'm terrible with those European names. But this institute still works to this day. And very interestingly, him and Gorbachev both noted that there was a medical side effect to this energy they had discovered, this technology, that you could use it to like treat medical ailments. And the way they describe it lines up also with Wilhelm Reich and his orgone energy shit. It's the same kind of bizarre alternate energy. Um, that being said, the Strasbourg Institute, it's got this big warning page about, while we're not technically saying if you use these techniques you don't need a vaccine, but you can use these techniques
to circumvent.
Yeah, it's pretty sketchy. It's I wouldn't rush to it for medical advice. I'm going to say that much. As a non-medical professional, I am not going to give them a check or anything. But it's bizarre because Gorbachev described the same effect, and Wilhelm Reich here in the U.S. described the same effect with his weird orgone accumulators. And my favorite story of Wilhelm Reich, he's a weird sex psychiatrist. He studied with Jung. He was a student of Freud in the same class with Jung, graduated, I think, second to him. And he went on to do all kinds of sexual pathology research, in which he discovered this special kind of medicinal energy release that occurs under orgasm. And it has to do with all kinds of like tantra, and it's a weird deep dive into the orgone energy and Reich and stuff. But my favorite story is that he would have this device he called the Cloud Buster.
Okay.
And it would actually do the opposite. It would create rainstorms. And there's ledgers from all these local farmers in upstate New York where he had his lab and was doing all this stuff, where they would pay him to come out and create rainstorms like on a regular basis on their field, like to water the fields, and constantly doing it. And so, did it work? I don't know. Those guys.
It's what they got going on in Dubai right now.
Again, it's interesting stuff. But the most interesting part is that one day he said there was a UFO watching him operating this thing and setting it up. And so, like, he really quickly spun around and fired it at the UFO. And this thing is just a, like, massive PVC pipes. You can look up pictures of it. It's very weird looking, but it's not like a water gun or anything. It literally is just this hollow contraption. It's the exact same contraptions Gorbachev built off the same principles that he discovered in bugs in Russia, Soviet Russia. Completely separate dudes divining these same things. But he fired it at this UFO, and he said the UFO like buckled and like started to crash towards the ground, and like at the last second like recovered and like zoomed off. He said it had this massive effect on its ability to fly. Like he nearly shot it out of the air with this cloud buster by just pointing this so-called directed energy device at it. And so these are just three of half dozen of scientists who are describing this alternate energy modality that exists. And all of their research kind of gets to this point and then just whoop, disappears. We were discussing earlier one of the other groups that had built a generator on similar principles. And there's videos of this generator like operating on an island, no cables, no nothing. And then after that video, nothing else. They've never posted anything else. You can't find their business listed on any stock exchanges anymore. They're just gone. And so,
you think the Petronas snatched them up real quick?
Yeah, I think there's always the idea that they explode your chest with like a heart attack gun, or direct.
It was like Kill Bill, just the
some kind of assassin. More likely, those guys get a check and they start working for the U.S. government or whatever government, wherever they're located.
Yeah, because we talked about earlier about things being more about money. We can always follow a trail of money when it comes to these people talking about things. Like, John, what do you believe if you think that these UFOs and aliens that they're talking about are real? What do you think they are, or do you think it's just an ulterior motive altogether?
What do I think they are? They're in between. As Chaz says, they're probably military, most of them, and then some of them are, unexplainable. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think that the whole reason all this came out is because there's probably some sort of internal conflict, probably fighting over some sort of military contract.
Yeah.
One is trying to gather at least the public support and give us a reason to, I guess, go for whatever organizations, whatever, contract, the military contractors trying to, squeeze in on somebody else. Gathered a bunch of scientists, and next thing you know, internal beef, war in the public, and somebody's gonna get paid at the end of this.
I've heard that
Yeah.
as a motivation for those 2019 videos that the Navy released, because it was the Navy specifically releasing them. And I've heard the discussion between some people who work in the military saying that was just the Navy's way of saying, hey, give us some of those. We know you have them. We're seeing you fly them, Air Force, CIA, whoever, Pentagon. We want some. Give it to us, or we'll blow the whole lid off this thing. Alternatively, I've heard it as just a general chess move, because if the whole crazy story I've described, if there's any truth to it, that means Russia's got him. Gorbachev was in Russia. Fucking the Nazis had him. That's where Strausenberg was, or I've said that name wrong 4 times now. I apologize.
I'm not mad. I'm not German. I don't give a shit.
We've discovered it in Reich, and that's how Reich's story actually ends. It's very tragic. The ATF steps in, takes all of his research technologies, and arrests him. He dies in prison, and none of those things have been released to the public. None of the stuff they took and cataloged when they raided his place, none of it's been released. So the Cloudbuster, the original one, doesn't exist anymore. It exists somewhere, probably next to the Ark of the Covenant in that fucking warehouse.
I actually really recently watched that, and I didn't. When people told me Indiana Jones is useless in that movie, I didn't believe them. And then I watched it. I said, he's actually useless in this movie.
He accomplishes nothing.
He accomplishes nothing. The end game is exactly what you should have just let them have it from the beginning. And
they would have all killed themselves anyways. But this whole concept with these devices, if that's true, this alternate energy, then it's simply that. It's just a secret mode of physics. It's exactly what happened when we discovered nuclear physics at the turn of the last century, where everyone was working on secret projects and trying to get ahead, and no one really knew what they were entirely until we dropped it on a bunch of Japanese people. And so I think there's a good chance we're in this pre-stage where these crafts are functional. Everyone's got them. No one's quite figured out how to use them. It's like the World War I with planes, where they had planes, but they were just throwing hand grenades over the side. They didn't have like bombers and tactical artillery and targeting yet. The idea is that perhaps we're getting there, and perhaps these craft are getting to that degree. And so the U.S. publishing these videos and making these statements is just a Cold War chess move. We're putting the pawn in everyone else's field. We're like, yeah, maybe it's aliens. Looking China dead in the eye while we say it. Yeah, no, maybe that's aliens. Yeah, aliens. They're sweating bullets in the corner.
Now, my question, Oscar, do you actually give a shit though? This is like, what does this do for my life right now? Like, I'm thinking about it. Like, if they did come up, I'm desensitized. I'm like, whatever, bro.
That's what we were talking about earlier. I was like, it gets to a point where it's like they keep saying the word historical. They keep bringing historical. This is life-changing, when in no way it's really life-changing. I still got to wake up, go to work, pay bills, come back home, do all the same things that I do every other day. Nothing is fundamentally changing by them saying, "Oh, trust us. UFOs are
I actually
real."
disagree. I think this would be fundamentally changing religiously, because religion really dictates how this world operates.
Real.
Yeah, if it was actually true, if they popped up right here, said "What up, bro," and then dipped again, like how do people go to their mosque in the morning? How do people go to temple? How do people go to church in the morning? And they're like, there's a big hole in the story, and I'm super confused.
I
and
think
it
the
sort
church
of like
should
warps. Like I feel like it'll have a more negative effect than we think. Not financially, not anything, but just in terms of people's belief and sort of our ability to use religion to sort of, sometimes manipulate and dictate, how people live their lives and stuff like that. Like, I feel like it would be that could be honestly be a reason for like governments, like, guys, we can't let them discover UFOs because then we can't use religion anymore against them. All right, and that's at least you
Well,
have like three,
that's
four
one of
sections
the
of the world where it's you go Middle East, Europe, North America, South America. That's pretty much like a big chunk of religion, like where religion is at its peak in terms of usage in
yeah.
military, sorry, in government. That would be shit. Even Africa, crap, hell, Africa, like that's a big chunk of the world that now like your main method of morality and control is basically there's a huge plot hole.
Yeah, but that's one of the main theories behind like Project Bluebeam is when they'll use like they talk about using a fake invasion to create a one world government by making something happen or appear to happen that's so profound that it makes the world all of the world's religions kind of obsolete.
Like Watchmen,
Yeah, see, I
when
don't
he blows
know.
up those cities.
I
Kind of.
see if it is the extraterrestrial hypothesis, I see religion doing what it does best and pivoting. It might evolve, they might incorporate it, or more likely they'll be like, we gotta convert those aliens. They don't know about Jesus, man. We gotta get out there
It's
and
like South
tell 'em,
Park, bro. When they
spread the good word to these
right,
aliens.
the
I
Mormons will be
really
all
do.
over that.
I think it'll be a fundraising. It'll be a boom for the church, if anything.
I
if
would
they
probably
can,
just be like, we told you, like we said, angels exist. We didn't think they were pretty, bro. Like they're
hey,
here. They're not good looking.
if they can sidestep diddling kids, man, they can
All
sidestep
right. All
aliens.
right.
They got
Well,
it.
guys,
They'll be fine.
I have to go. I didn't plan on being on here. I popped in out of curiosity, but this was a super dope conversation. Oscar, I guess I'll see you
Yeah,
on
man.
Monday.
Yeah, Monday. We're still set for Monday, my friend.
All right.
All
See you
right.
guys
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you,
Appreciate it,
dropping
man.
Yeah.
by.
anytime.
Peace.
Wait, how do I get out? Okay.
There we go. Yeah, yeah, I mean he brought up he did talk to me earlier about he's like I'm more logically thinking, um not very in that realm of the way we
No,
would
it's an
probably
important
think about
perspective
things.
though, because
Yeah, no,
again,
which is a great perspective.
Yep.
I think, unfortunate as it is, no one wants to hear it as a paranormal investigator. But for the
Yeah,
alien question, we need academia to be the ones. If a bunch of dudes from Harvard and MIT were coming to Congress and sitting down and being like, okay, listen, there's aliens, I'd be like, holy fuck, that's pretty big. But since it's some guy who worked in you know, in the military, they take anybody. That's their whole
yeah,
thing is not smart enough to get into college, come to us. That's their fucking thing. So it's not like we're going to the most academic minds for these answers. And without those people, and again, it sucks because there has been a resistance to these ideas, like a illogical resistance. They have shunned their duties in this aspect before, but that doesn't mean we can do it necessarily without him. You know what I mean? That there's no one. Even if I got an alien in a bag and I was like, "Look, guys, I've got him. Here he is." I'm still just one dude who writes for a paranormal magazine. No one's gonna take that for full evidence, and the government's gonna kick down my door and shoot me in the head and take it for themselves. So we need it to be on that academic level, which is unfortunate in a way because it is going to you're going to have to rely on those science communicators. Toilet flush once again,
yeah,
but your Neil deGrasse Tysons and such, because
yeah,
even though he's totally ignorant of the subject, it's good he's slowly learning about it. He's slowly getting there. And eventually, if there is solid enough evidence to have a somewhat of a paradigm shift, it starts there. Or you audit the Pentagon. Again, I think
yeah,
that's still a valid option. You get an exact number on what we spend on disinformation, what we spend on secret planes, what we spend on alien autopsies, if any, and then we might have a realistic idea. But I don't think we're likely to give in on that one anytime soon.
So, what do you guys think would be the future after this? Let's say the latest news is the Peru things, right? The Peru beings. What do you feel is going to come after this? Do you feel we'll actually get one of those 4K quality videos of the 7 foot tall beings, or would it be something else? We'll start with John. We'll let him.
I think it's going to be a mass sighting over a big city like New York or Houston or Chicago. Probably like, I mean, I
Kind of
wouldn't.
like the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah, kind of like the Phoenix Lights. It might even be, when they're shooting, Good Morning America. It's going to happen right then above them when they're outside, and it's going to be live. Like 9/11. I mean, it's going to be something like that, and or it's going to be over some foreign country where they actually land and go to their president or whoever the foreign country and do a conference. I mean, it's going to be one of those two things, or it's just going to be as you said, one of those high def videos of the ship or the alien flying the ship.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be either at this point, at the way that the rate
Yeah.
at the rate
But I
that
think
things are going.
I think it will be a mass sighting. It's gonna have to be a mass sighting to actually get it found. Hardcore America to be behind it.
Yeah. And what do you think, Chaz?
I mean, it's tough to say. I think when it comes to a lot of the UFO phenomenon, a lot of it will remain mysterious because I think there's a whole consciousness aspect to the phenomenon that we haven't really touched on because we're talking about the damn government. But as far as the UFO dialogue and how it's evolving in that realm, in the government sphere, I do think you're going to see in our lifetime a kind of watershed moment, and we're getting close with Ukraine. I don't know if you guys seen that video of the object over, I forget which city, somewhere on that border, but it's just this glowing orb. There's a bunch of people filming it, and then it sits there and hovers, and it takes heavy fire from this anti-air gun, explosive rounds, and they're like hitting it, like it's getting there, and it just sits there and takes it like nonchalant, like whatever, no big deal, and then just whoop, disappears. And so I think you might have one of these watershed moments where something happens, Taiwan gets invaded or whatever, something on that scale, and we just drop the like, yeah, all right, a lot of these are us. Like those triangles and some of the tubes you've been seeing, those are us. Not all of them, but those ones are. And we have this rollout. I do think that what we've seen, if you look at it as often call it civ moves, because I'm a big Civilization fan. 5, fuck 6. But there, these weird policies and moves you make to make sure your civilization's one step ahead of everyone else's civilization. And so I think that a civ move might be the next unveiling of this. We've seen through the history of UFOs, especially their presence over nuclear facilities and things, that they seem to be a checkmate to a lot of the traditional ICBM missile firings and things like that.
Yeah.
These little metal spheres, I think, are little metal spheres designed to fly at like a quantum speed and hit a missile before it fires. You can blink it across the globe real quick. And so as your nuke's taken off, it just flashes through it, blows it up. And now you have a nuclear disaster in your country instead of wherever you're firing that missile. And even, Elon Musk's, we've seen those metal spheres hang around his rocket launches and shit like that. I think that's probably the other nations showing us the same kind of displays of force. You know what I mean? We're in this chicken and a mouse kind of scenario, or cat mouse. Chicken and what? I don't know where I was going with the chicken. But we're in this scenario, well, of playing chicken, like who's gonna do the first, UFO based attack. We're flexing these
Yeah.
two moves. It certainly looks like that if you're taking it from that Civ lens, that perspective. It certainly could be spun that way. But man, like you can still go out in Marfa, Texas, and see glowing lights that act in a weird way that no one
Yeah.
understands. So there's still something to that idea of paranormal UFOs. Like there's something out there that is, beyond just those Civ moves. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's certainly a strange time to be alive. That's the biggest, I think, takeaway. Whatever ends up panning out, it's going to be weirder than what we think is happening. I have a certain feeling.
Yeah, I think it's just gonna get weirder and weirder. I mean, it did take a while for them to even say like, okay, these crafts are definitely real that you guys are all seeing. Like we knew it, but it took them a while to say anything. Because each of us has had some type of interaction with seeing something in the sky and wondering like what the hell is that type of thing.
Hmm.
I mean, I myself have had a light come from the sky and go straight towards my car, to the point where I swerved out of the way, and then when I turned around, it was like gone, which it
Wow.
feeds into that more of that paranormal aspect of like it's not just this kind of nuts and bolts thing that I think these congressional hearings are saying to us. There's more to this that we know that we have experienced ourselves. So it is going to get crazier. Like I think it is going to get crazier as time goes on because it's definitely wild.
For
So
sure.
wild.
I agree.
Well, I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say on the matter. I think we kind of hit all the points. We talked all the news that has been
Yeah,
happening.
great conversation.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully, whoever listens, you guys enjoy it. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment in the comment section about what you believe. You can tell us we're all crazy. You can tell us your theory, whatever you want to do. And then don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all the nonsense that goes on YouTube. If you
Yep.
have your own personal experiences, encounters with anything, you can email inducedfearpod@gmail.com or hit me up on the socials at Induced Fear. John, where can they find you?
They can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Cache Valley Bigfoot.
All right. And then Chaz.
Yeah, you can find me on all the social medias at Chaz of the Dead, and you can find all my articles and writing escapades at paranormality.com. A bunch of great content and spooky stuff over there. So go check that out if you like not just UFOs, but all the other high strangeness stuff. It's a great source of that kind of weirdness.
Sweet.
Yeah, yeah. I know that John here, he dives more within the Bigfoot realm. If you want, send your stories, your experiences to him. You're gathering some for a book. Am I right?
Yeah. Yep, I am.
Yeah. So you can head over to John Cache Valley Bigfoot and share your stories. Go look up Paranormality magazine. Chad and them do great work over there. And I'll put all the links for everything down below for everybody. And for everybody listening, don't forget to ask questions and face your fears. Thanks for joining me, John, and Chaz on this episode. Oh, and Karim, who came on for this episode of Induced Fear. Bye, everyone.